You know that we're going into an age of higher consciousness, and it's so obvious when you look for it that it's everywhere, it's all around us. We're going to be talking about specifically education, how it applies to education, and the enormous shift that's trying to happen in education, and that we are all on the forefront of that change. We happen to be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the more outward expression of that change. So 100 years ago, there was a young man in India. He was about 24 years old. So it seems to be a common age for getting started in things like this. He had recently been given the title Swami Yogananda. Up to that point, he'd been called Mukunda Ghosh. He had also, very importantly for us, he had very recently had his first full experience, at least in this lifetime, of samadhi, the highest state that you can attain in this form. And his teacher, Sri Yukteswar, had, after helping him have this experience, asked him, he said, well, do you want to keep it all for yourself, or do you want to share? And of course, the answer is to share. So at that point, he went out and he started formally looking into creating some kind of a structure to share with young people. That first expression took place in a town called Dihika in India. It wasn't a very glamorous start. It reminds us of some other things that we've been through, but one of the first, it's very hard to find anything about that, but one of the little things I found was that they didn't have a floor. They had just a dirt pad that they were trying to work on. So one of the first things they did is pour concrete. And they were out there, he had about 6 or 7 boys, and they were out there making concrete, and so they could have a floor they're building. Nirani was reminding me last night when she came here to start to teach school, and I said, did you have a construction course in your teacher training? And I was serious, because in order to teach, you needed to make your classroom possible. So we were in a very strong tradition that way. Jay was talking about when he interviewed Bruce and Carol when they came in, and he asked him if he knew construction skills, because they had doors that needed to be hung so they could have a classroom. And so it's a well-trodden path. So that was the very beginning. And what Yogananda was doing back in 1917, 1916, he was recalling to people an ancient tradition from the yogic past called the Gurukula. And that name was the name that they used for education in ancient history, and in a time, if again going back to the yugas, of higher consciousness. And it was an approach to education that it takes a lot of introspection and depth to actually try to tune into, because education was so different. It was different. One way to say it is, in the lower ages of consciousness that you're just coming out of, everything is matter-based. Everything is focused on trying to work with matter to improve our lives. Somebody mentioned this week in our classes here, they said that in the 500 years between, I'm not sure what range she was talking about, but somewhere between 0 AD and 500, the main technological improvement was the wheelbarrow. And it took 500 years to perfect the wheelbarrow. And now we see things happening so much faster. But interestingly enough, our education is one of the most difficult things to move into this new age, because it's extremely conservative. People get very conservative about their children, and we've all seen that in working with the schools and the parents that come in. And yes, they want to move things on and try new things, but they want to make sure that the basics are covered, because people are very concerned about that part of their training. So we have a system of education that is deeply, deeply rooted in matter, and the transmission of how do you work with matter. And what Yogananda was pioneering was a completely different approach, saying that the basis for education is consciousness. The basis is not matter. And to try to make that simple shift from matter to consciousness is what's been going on for 100 years now. We're beginning to see a wider appreciation of this in so many different parts of culture. I was having breakfast with Marguerite this morning. She was mentioning she had just been introduced to nonviolent communication. So many people might be familiar with that. It's a wonderful approach that tries to bring a different consciousness to solving people's interpersonal problems. We've seen a lot of movement in the last 20 years with mindfulness in education, yoga and meditation. There was this major lawsuit down in Encinitas over the last 10 years, testing whether you could teach yoga in public school. And after all the appeals and everything, the judge says, yes, you can, because yoga is not a sectarian practice, which would be outlawed, of course, by the church-state separation. He said it may have been that, the judge's ruling was it may have been that way in the past, but he says you can't say that's the case now because you have NFL players practicing yoga. You have the Marines down the coast from Encinitas practicing yoga. You have, it's just become a tool for personal well-being. So you see things on that level coming into play more and more in education, at least in the parts of education that are still moving in the constructive direction, because there's another backlash going on I'll talk about in a second. But you also, Anandi Gray and I had a chance, it's been about 3 weeks ago now, to be part of a conference. There was the first conference of its kind called the International Positive Education Conference. And this was a get-together sponsored by the positive psychology movement, which in itself is an expression of change, dating back maybe a quarter of a century, to focus on the positive parts of the human condition rather than the solving the problems, getting people dealing with disease. So it's just, we can see this shift starting to happen, trying to happen. It's also, though, being resisted by a clinging to some of these old standards. The idea that we get so fixated on this transmission of matter, the old transmission, and we're trying to do it better and better, so we get more and more uptight about getting kids to focus on their academics. And so we have fewer and fewer times for recess, fewer and fewer times for play, fewer and fewer times for music, art, anything except the key, the academic focus, and you're trying to push that harder and harder. It's just like trying to squeeze blood out of a stone or something. People are desperate for it, and they keep pushing harder and harder. We were talking this morning about testing preschoolers to see if they're kindergarten ready before they go in, and it gets to absurd cycles. I mean, we talked this morning. We were talking about how you're not supposed to touch preschoolers anymore. In certain circles, you're supposed to not hands off, and it's just mind-boggling things. One of my favorites was the company that came out with a solution to what do you do with the restlessness in these kindergartners, because they don't get outside. They only get outside maybe a maximum of 10 minutes a day is all that's allowed. So what do you do when you're 5 years old? You've got all this energy and you can't do this. Well, you start to get jittery. Well, this company came up with a solution of you put a pedal wheel underneath the desk. So when the child's sitting at the desk, they can pedal and they can get their energy out that way, but still stay focused on the academic result. It's absurd, of course, but it's just, again, we're just trying to move and everybody's trying to get it at their own pace. So we have education for life that came along. So when Yogananda put these things into practice, he didn't really have a chance to develop them over a long period of time. He only spent 4 years doing that, and then his life changed. Everybody here knows the story, how he came to the United States. He felt summoned there and came over here, and he found out that the United States was not anywhere near ready for this kind of education in 1920. People didn't have the slightest clue of why they would want to put their child in a school like this. And so he shifted his focus to working with adults to try to help the adults understand these subtler principles of consciousness and why it would be helpful to people to learn these things, with the idea that eventually these parents would get to the point where they would like to have that for their children. So that's been a long process. There's a wonderful book out, if you haven't seen it, called American Veda, which just charts the history of these Indian teachings coming into our culture. And Yogananda has a huge part in that. He's not the only one. Other people have come along. Swami Vivekananda was one of the first people to come to America from India back in 1898, I think. But he was just here for a quick visit, and then he went back to India. Other people then, of course, since then, Maharishi coming and, of course, attracting the Beatles, and that changing everything in the culture back in the 60s and 70s. So we do see it. We see this change happening. One of my favorite stories to tell, though, is about the whole idea of yoga and people understanding it, because we had our school started in the 70s. Yoga was completely still unknown outside a very small circle of people. And I remember getting this phone call from this parent, one that said, well, I heard you had a school up here, and I was interested in finding out what makes you different. Why do you have a school? And I said, well, we incorporate yoga in what we do with our children. He says, oh, yoga. Yeah, I like that. He says, we actually have it for breakfast every morning. And so that's 1975 or so. Okay. So now we're in an era where it's really changed. There are one person, the person that wrote that book, American Veda, said that there are more yoga studios in Los Angeles than there are gas stations at this point. And yoga is everywhere. It's in response to the consciousness that's shifting on the planet, getting more and more powerful and vibrant, but the energy that comes with that is hard to control, and people are seeing the need. They have to have some techniques for calming down and getting centered, and so yoga is the perfect antidote for that. So we see the culture starting to grow, starting to become more receptive to these things. We're at the cusp now of a time when the whole world is going to start to look for these kind of answers. We were at this conference. We were really the only people there who had actually been using these principles at this positive education conference. Everybody was excited about getting into it and trying to bring them in, but we were really the only people there who had actually been doing it for any length of time and had any background with it. So we do have the opportunity of being a vanguard position for it. So how do you work with consciousness? How do you make that shift from matter to consciousness? Well, when we started here in 1972, all we had was a couple of things that Yogananda had put together back in the 20s. One was the psychological chart, which I'll refer to later in the morning. The other was the balanced life. And when I went to J. Donald Walters, who we also refer to as Swami Kriyananda, he used his name J. Donald Walters when he wrote Education for Life. He hadn't written the book yet. We're also celebrating the 30th anniversary of the publishing of Education for Life, so it's another auspicious number, if you like the decimal system, I always. So I went to him and I said, well, okay, how are we supposed to do this? And he said, well, you have to learn to look inside. And I'm being a young devotee who wasn't sure what that meant. I kept asking. I said, well, maybe I should go out. Maybe I should go study Montessori or Steiner, or maybe I should go to Ranchi. That's this place where Yogananda started his school. And he said, no. he said, you have to get it from inside. He also said, there's nothing to learn it from Ranchi at this point. And I found that out a few years later. I got to visit in 1980, and I found out it had lost its any element of connection to what Yogananda had been talking about in the 20s. Somehow it just shifted and it was gone. But in this idea of, well, looking inside, it was, I had some clues and we did something, but when he wrote the book in 1986, he just finally clarified everything, brought it into focus about what do we mean by consciousness? What do we mean by consciousness? And he put it in the terms of progressive development. Progressive development, to me, is the core of Education for Life. When you start to think and look at your classroom in terms of progressive development, you start to look at where is the light? Where is the light consciousness in this situation? And that becomes your place of reference for everything else. It's a battle. I'll use the word battle because I know in myself it's a battle, because with this idea that school means a curriculum, a set curriculum. We use the term in the United States, we have the term Common Core. And if you talk to people, what is education all about? Well, it's about meeting these Common Core standards so that children learn these things at a certain rate. And there's nothing wrong with a Common Core. It's nice to have a curriculum map as a reference point. It's nice to remember that you teach subtraction before you teach algebra. It's nice to remember that you learn to spell before you start to create how to use the semicolon. So it tracks things like this. It gives you a longitudinal approach. However, if that's your focus, you lose the essence. You lose the essence of who the child is, what kind of consciousness they have, and what's happening to their consciousness. Irene's going to come up and share part of the adventure of what we've had in trying to learn this, trying to keep shifting our mind back to consciousness and not to get fixated on how are they doing with their math scores or how are they doing with their history, and to say, it's a different world. Now, one of the very important things that happens is that eventually we realize that consciousness is just more primal, if that's the right word. It's more essential than matter. So if you work with consciousness, matter takes care of itself. You do shift matter, but you shift it not by focusing on the matters, but by focusing on the consciousness. One of the nice things at this conference was people were very excited because finally, last year, there was a study came out that showed that schools that focused on the principles of positive education, which is basically bringing consciousness into the classroom, their test scores were improved. And everybody was excited about that. And we were just sitting there smiling and applauding because we've known that for 45 years. We've known that from the very beginning when I was just personally just struggling to figure out what the heck this stuff was. I would test the kids once in a while and we would find out, oh my gosh, they're 1 or 2 or 3 years ahead of grade level. And how did that happen? It was like this mystery because we didn't focus on the academics. We weren't putting academics on the altar and worshiping it every day. But what we found out is that because children's consciousness was expanding, they automatically, their test scores went up. And it was, it's almost counterintuitive if you think of it. But anyway, but now it's been, verified not just by our test things, but by this broader group saying, okay, it works not only in America, it works in Europe, it works in, people were at this conference, they were from Dubai, they were from China, they were from Australia, they were from all over the world. And they were all finding these same things. Well, again, when we understand it, consciousness is more important to focus on. And so if we can keep our focus there, then we're going to be ahead of the game. Are we going to do it perfectly? No. We are not going to do it perfectly. Are we going to make steps in that direction and continually remind each other that this is where we're trying to go? Yes. And that's what we're here about this for these 2 days, is just to try to keep that focus when we go back in, because we're all going to be susceptible to that pressure to slip back into the older mode and just start to focus on the matter approach. So I hope we'll get a little kickstart this morning. So I'll invite Irene to come up. Irene Schulman, she's been my wonderful co-worker for the last quarter of a century.
Okay, so first, I'm inviting Hashi. She's my co-worker. She's going to lead us in.
Okay, well, we haven't been sitting that long, but I was thinking to awaken it. Can you hear me? Because I can't stand by here.
Grab the mic and carry it.
Okay, so I'm going to awaken everybody. I guess this is enthusiasm, but let's pretend like it's the first day of preschool, and you come, and you're either really scared because, oh my gosh, you're 3 years old, 3, 4, 5. I do have 5-year-olds. Or you're asleep or something. So it's circle time. I've gotten everybody as comfortable as I can. And I notice people are falling asleep. How do I pull them together? Okay, and you guys stand, and we're going to do this together. And first, scissor walk as best you can. scissor walk, scissor walk. The kids loved it, okay? And then add something to it. Blink your eyes, move your head, click your tongue. Okay, that's one thing. And now, tiptoe. Tiptoe walk, tiptoe walk. Anywhere you can. Heel walk, heel walk, heel walk. And then we're back in our place. Let's go, let's be a 5-pointed star. And stretch and move. Count your points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then come down. Wake up legs. Wake up legs. Wake up stomach. Wake up back. Wake up arms. Wake up head. Let's see what else. And I've tried to think of words that fit this. The positive, energetic, enthusiastic, which isn't words that kind of grip 3-year-olds. So I said, we're happy. Or no, we're happy. We have energy and more energy. So they get, okay, so now I sort of got them, and then we'd sit down and we'd do our song. And this is something new, which I think I'm going to try right away the first day of school, which we did during SRW for those who were there, which is I think I'm going to say, okay, let's focus where our no, I don't say focus. Let's go to where our happiness is. In our brain, this is where you get happiness. Close your eyes.
Don't forget that people are watching from around the world. They can't hear you.
So everyone, this is where you go when you want happiness. Now everyone sit down.
Okay, so that brought out our preschool selves. And that's just about how I felt when I started teaching, just like a preschooler. And I was sort of invited to come teach sort of the way I invited Hashi. Nitai sort of started inviting me. How about if you help with the Spanish class? How about if you do this? How about if you do that? How about if you teach? That's when I started to panic. Like, I don't mind helping. So there was a staff meeting, and at that staff meeting, somebody said, we need somebody to teach 4th, 5th grade. Irene, you seem to like teenagers. I did like teenagers. That's why I wouldn't want to teach. I did like kids. That's why I wouldn't want to teach. Because it was one of those things where I didn't like school. I didn't like academics. I didn't succeed in regular school. So, so I was invited to teach. So I started trying to learn. He was teaching me. He says, if you're going to teach spelling, you should teach spelling. I said, I can't spell. He goes, well, study at night and teach in the morning. Oh, okay, I can do this. And he said, they're not hard words. They're just 4th grade words. Well, okay, I'll try. So little by little. So at a certain point, I was asked to take a class. So I wrote this letter, basically, asking for Swami's compassion. It was, pretty much, I felt like I was saying, these are the reasons I can't teach. And hoping that he would say, yeah, you're right, you can't teach. But all he said is, you don't have to teach. You just share things you know. And I'm not a teacher either. And so I thought, okay, that's all I need to do. So that's what I'm going to do today. Okay, it starts with what kind of system would work for me to teach in. This is the only kind of system I could ever teach in because it doesn't focus on the academics. And I was testing this theory because recently I was reading Education for Life about 1 million times because I'm working with teachers and we're going through the book. And so I'm thinking to myself, how many times does he use the word academics? Like, teach academics, test the academics, see how you're doing. I think it's only once. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think it's only once in the book where he says, our school is able to teach academics while they're teaching people how to be happy. And so what he actually says is, imagine a system of education that seeks, along with the formal curriculum, to teach people how to be happy. So then I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, what's the curriculum? Okay, here's the curriculum. So why do we teach these things? Okay, so he took our subjects, math, history, science, and he took the heart or the goal of these subjects, and he said, let's just call them these names, because if we call them these names, hopefully the teachers will focus on the purpose of the class, okay? So I looked at these names, which I already knew, and then he said, there's key qualities that we should focus on when we teach these subjects. So he says, for personal development, teach vitality, nobility, and magnetism. Okay. All right. For self-expression and communication, which would be English, teach clarity, creativity, self-discipline, and self-confidence. All right, now picture this kid going through preschool through 12th grade, focusing on this. In cooperation, teach harmony, sensitivity, and servicefulness, okay? Understanding people, teach empathy, compassion, and tolerance. For our science class or our earth class, teach wonder, appreciation, and respect for life. And for wholeness, focus on what it takes to develop, to grow towards the goals of maturity. Focus on expansion, wisdom, contentment, joy, and a practical appreciation of God. All right. So, you got your subject, but it doesn't matter if they don't know how to spell. Do they know how to communicate? If you get them excited about learning how to communicate, they'll get excited about spelling, because they'll say, I really want to say this, or I really want to know this. I need to know how to read. I need to know how to spell. So at least that's how it happened to me. Okay. So we're focusing on light consciousness, which is really interesting, because if you think about this, Swami created this system for teachers to focus and look for light consciousness, look for light moments, and those kids who are able to tune into the lightness. Specific gravity, he actually called it specific spiritual gravity, which I didn't catch before. But it's, so you're working with consciousness. Just where is the child? So that child tends to complain. That child tends to be motivated when I offer an ice cream. That child just seems to want to learn about everything. And he says, look for the children who just seem to be looking for what we have to offer. So what we have to offer are all these things. It's almost like training a spiritual warrior. It feels like after this system, you have somebody who's just really well developed, real courageous, honest, and all this stuff. So he says, what happens is you walk into the classroom and you see, well, happens to me, you see there's a kid who seems pretty happy. Then there's the kid that's sort of just looking to see, what am I going to get out of this class? What are you going to give me? And then there's the kid who's hitting somebody, who's not interested. So first instinct is, oh, protect everybody from that kid. Stop him, whatever. And Swami says that can set the tone for the whole year. And he says you're starting with focusing on what's not working, on focusing on sort of not the light consciousness. But if you take the child who's there, who says, I'm a spiritual warrior, I'm a great leader, I'm a genius, help. Okay, you take him and you work with his energy, and then you create this magnetism. And then the one who says, what do you have for me, starts following this guy, or this guy starts helping, and then they sort of help each other. But if you don't start at the top, then you don't have the help that you need to help everybody. Okay, a story. So, when I was first learning, first I learned that students have to see you as somebody they wish to train, okay? So you walk in and they look at you and they say, does she have any potential? And the way I learned that is I was handing my job over to somebody else, but I had to find that somebody else. I was a 4th, 5th grade teacher. And I invited other teachers who were interested to come in and just teach something. And there was this man. He was so excited about nature, and he was so excited about science. And I said, why don't you come in and teach and the kids something or share this? So he came in, and he says, okay, we're going to go do nature games. And I had a kid in the class who was really excited about birds. And he loved birds. So he's excited about nature to start with. So we're all following this guy out into the little woods. And my little boy, he says, oh, do you hear that? That's a so-and-so bird. And so I was like, okay. He goes, I've never seen the so-and-so bird. Can we go see the so-and-so bird? And I said, well, ask him. He goes, can we see the so-and-so bird? And the teacher says, no, we're going to play games. We're going to play nature games. And so the little boy's like this. And so everybody goes marching, and the little boy comes, stands with me. And I said, is that a so-and-so bird? He goes, yeah. And I said, why don't you go see him? But don't tell anybody where you're going. He's like, okay. So he sneaks away. And that's what you can do with these light kids. You can trust them because they're thinking of everybody. They're thinking about you. They're thinking about me. They're thinking about the other kids, you know. I mean, he wanted to invite the other kids, but anyway. So later he shows up. He comes back. And so the next day, this is what I would do. I'd get the kids' evaluation. So what do you guys think if we invite him back? Or let's invite him back. What do you think? Silence. Somebody says, I don't think so. It was fun. So I said, well, why? What was he like? And they knew I was looking for another teacher, and they said, he was nice, but he didn't listen to us. And I thought, oh, okay. Then I thought, these kids, they took me on. You know, they took me on. They taught me how to speak their language. And I took them on in that. I just kept wanting them to get bigger and bigger. Another thing that I sort of thought of was this one time we had the kids go talk to trees, or maybe I had the kids talk to trees. And I said, this was for our English class. So I gave them a little journal. I said, we're going to go talk to a tree. So you find your own tree and just ask questions and write down what they say. And so most of the kids were into it. One kid later got into it. But anyway, they went out to talk to their trees. Then after, one of them says, one of the kids who tend to just want to work with me and not sort of against me, he says, can we go read our books with our trees? Let's just go read our books. Now I saw the class and I saw, these kids can read a book by the tree. Those kids are going to take off if I leave them out of the classroom. And those kids are just going to, hit each other. So, so it was this thing where I just said, how many people here think that they could actually read with their tree out there? And so I said, if you feel like you're capable, then I want you to go. But I'm going to, I'll just see if your tree's enjoying it or not enjoying it. And if your tree's not enjoying it, then you get to come in the classroom. And then in the classroom, there's an upstairs loft. You can sit up there if you feel like you just need a quiet space. But if it seems like you can't be quiet up there, then you can sit down here. And then I can just be with you, and that'll be fun. And so just giving the kids sort of, a chance for them to decide what level they want to be at. It's fun. Okay, so who are these kids with this light spiritual gravity? Okay, this surprised me. These are quotes. High energy people, these are high energy people, and I think he means high spiritual energy people, are magnetic. And only high energy people can be developed into real leaders. Students like, let me see. These students are the least likely to develop into teachers' pets. Therefore, they're not going to be the yes children, okay? Okay, so think about your yes children. Those probably won't be the ones. Okay, so then it says, occasionally they get into some mischief. Okay, so that's another sign. They feel a little mischievous. That might be my one. Okay, I'll give you an example of 3 mischievous kids that I took to Italy. In the high school, we were having a rough year, and Nitai had to make a rule. We're gonna only give 15 minutes of our meeting to solving problems that these not so light kids are doing. And then the rest of the time, we're going to focus on the light consciousness, okay? Swami also says you're going to bring out more of what you focus on. So we're focusing on light consciousness. So what came out of this is we got to this place where we're just like, we never talk about these 3 kids. We always talk about everybody who's not doing so well, but let's talk about these 3 kids. Let's figure out something that works for them. So the idea was, let's send somebody to Italy, to Europe, with these 3 kids, because then they'll notice that we saw them. And in the high school, the kids have to earn tuition. They take more responsibility for their emotional state, and they take more responsibility for their academics. And they also, on our report cards, we grade them as far as like using energy grade. So violet and blue mean that you are, you're just, it's not necessarily that you're great at the subject, but you're enthusiastic about learning the subject. So we did make that decision, which was huge because the other kids were not that happy. But we decided, let's just make a statement that this school, we're going to focus on bringing out the light. So I go to Italy, and the thing was, okay, you guys, you're going to have to earn more money to pay for this trip. You're going to have to pick yourself up emotionally because Irene, who volunteered, isn't going to be able to pick you up because she's going to be picking herself up. And you have to pull together your academics because Irene, that's not her focus. She'll take care of you. I mean, in other ways. So anyway, so off we went. So we get to Venice, and that's when they decided to do this thing to me. We're in Venice, and I have no sense of direction. And they know this because we've already gotten lost a lot of times, and they're in charge of keeping us on the right train and going to the right place. And I said, I'm going to have nothing to do with that. So sometimes we got lost, sometimes we didn't. So here we are in Venice, and one of them says, let's not tell Irene where we need to go. Let's just wait until she tells us where to go, and let's just see where she takes us. And it was so fun. I mean, it was scary for me, but they just looked at each other like, oh, this will be fun, just to have Irene stretch, because she's always stretching us. So, so it was interesting because I just said, I'm just going to stand here forever. And then, after a while, I would take a step and just see if they smile or not smile. And I would come out. And so, anyway, I found the way. But what they taught me after that, I always expected that they would do it again. So every time I was like, okay, we're going down that street. Okay, now we're making a left. Okay, so they got me to want it, so it's nice. Oh, by the way, Swami always uses the word expansive when he's talking about like spiritual consciousness. He uses it over and over again. So an expansive child, somebody who's naturally wanting to reach out. He also says that another clue to who you're looking for is the person who tries to help somebody else. So that's huge. So he goes, I do have some quotes. Every teacher ought to assiduously cultivate leadership qualities in any student who shows an inclination to reach down and help others below him on the ladder to grow towards emotional maturity. Okay, so those are all the treasures that I have, but we'll do two things. First, let's close our eyes. Oh, no, sorry. Let's open our eyes. Let's stand up. Okay, feel how your body feels. All right. Now, pull your shoulders up, back, and drop them straight. Look up a little bit. Do a little energetic walk. Okay. Take a seat. Sit up nice and straight. Here's another quote. A child of light consciousness reveals in his every nature an inner spirit of lightness. You may see such a child raising his hands frequently. Whoops, raise your hands. Raising their arms frequently, squaring their shoulders. His sitting position is upright. His gaze is more habitually upward, and his walk is energetic. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. So, and we're going to focus on, how do we bring light into the class? So I'm going to give a few pointers, and we're going to break up into subgroups, and people are going to share their experiences with this, because it is an adventure in learning how to do this. And like the man the nature person that you were describing, had a part of it. He had the kids out in nature, and he even had more of it. He was going to play games with them in nature, but he hadn't learned the point yet of letting the kids take the lead. He still had the sense that I'm in charge and I'm going to make this happen. One of the things you find with light consciousness is it's impersonal. It doesn't come through any particular person. It just happens. And what we have to learn to do is to be awake, ready for it, ready to watch it happen. My experiences with it is it comes into class in at least three main ways. One way, it comes in through the teacher being as centered as possible. I remember finding that very early on, when if I came to school and I'd had a good morning meditation, we would have a great morning in school. If I had slept in and got up to meditate, it was like the feedback was immediate. I'd come in and people were just off the wall. It was just nuts. And so gradually I learned that lesson. I don't know how long it took me. I will be ashamed to tell you. But so I figured that out. Okay, my consciousness coming in is a key. Then it got to the point I realized, it's so important that I've got to meditate at noon too, because otherwise my afternoons go downhill because it's been too long. I haven't recentered. So in those days I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder, so I could do whatever I wanted to. So I just started meditating at lunch. Sometimes the kids would go nuts. They would just, because there was nobody else there to watch them. But I just said, no, I know this is more important. I've got to have my 15 minutes of meditation. So I'd meditate for 15 minutes, and I'd go unpeel them off the wall or whatever they had been doing. And we would have a good afternoon. But it was just such a clear thing. So a huge part of light, and one that's most we can work on most carefully, is cultivate our own consciousness of light, and then bring that into the classroom as much as we can. Secondly, you're looking for moments of light, and you never know where these are going to pop up. I actually think it's impossible to lesson plan for a light moment. When I wrote my book, For Goodness Sake, I just had all these things that had happened in the school that I wanted to put in one place. And so I started making notes and writing them down. And what I found out was every one of them was unplanned. Every one of them just happened because of, I don't know, it just was, things would just pop up spontaneously. I remember the lesson we had, I called it the dog food derby. But it was, we were doing a fundraiser with the junior high kids, and I think we were going to take a bike trip, one of our bike trips in the early days. And so we got a job at a kennel. And it was something that I'd found in the newspaper, and the guy needed a bunch of sacks of dog food moved from point A to point B. And so we arrived, and here we are, 12, 11, 13-year-olds. And he points to the boxes, the bags. The bags weighed, maybe 45 pounds. They were hefty bags. And he actually had hired 2 men to do this work, thinking that we weren't going to be able to accomplish very much because we were just a bunch of gangly kids. And so we go in to start work, and the men are kind of, grunting and groaning and moving things. And the kids get into it, and they figured out this assembly line, for lack of a better word, where they just line themselves up in a row, and the first person would take the bag and swing it to the next person, and they just drew. And it worked so well that we actually ended up way outperforming the guys who'd been hired. And the kids just had this incredible experience of cooperation and just, creative thinking and stuff. And it was just like, this was life-changing for all of us, but it was completely unplanned. I had no idea that's what was going to happen. And so those moments of light, we have to be, as our teachers, we have to be ready to hear them and watch them and take advantage of them. Like, to use that nature thing, when the little boy said about this bird, and he said it with the consciousness of light, that was the window that was open. That was the way it could have gone that would have captured people. And so we have to be flexible. We have to go into that with our sensors always turned on. Where is that light consciousness, and what can I do? How can I support it? Where can I move with it? tremendous things happen. Now, the other part of it is that some kids consistently show more light than other ones. And like Irene was saying, those are the ones you're going to start to look at to try to just support their energy, because often they're going to bring in ideas and energy and magnetism into the class that's going to help the other kids. More so than you can help the other kids, because the kids look to other kids faster than they look to adults in those situations. So you're going to look for ways to support those kids that tend to show that. That's your job. That's as an EFL teacher. Which kids seem like that? And sometimes it takes you a while to figure it out. Sometimes you make a mistake. I certainly made my share of mistakes with that, because it's a subtle thing. Swami says it's an energetic student, but obviously not all energy is uplifting energy. Okay, if you think of energy, what kind of energy is that child putting out? And so you're looking for the refinement on it. It's not just, some people are very ego-active energy or rajasic energy, if you know the terms. And that's not the energy we're looking for. We're looking for the uplifting energy. We're looking for the lighter energy, and the kids that put that out. And it looks different. It looks different when you have to kind of train yourself. But so you start to see those kids, and then you start to you can't go in there and point to them and say, this is our wonderful light student in the class that we're going to follow her. Because what it does is it puts it back on the ego-active level. We're emphasizing the personality instead of the energy. We're emphasizing, so you have just killed it. In an attempt to support it, you just killed it. And you probably will do that several times. And it's okay, because you'll learn, and the kids are resilient, and we keep going back. But if you learn to the right way, you're able to support it in a kind of indirect way by just being open to their ideas, being open and being able to help them to develop their ideas. Some of the best examples I have, the ones that just made huge differences, was one of the girls I had, Leah, who was interested in kirtan and chanting. And she was the only one in the school that was interested in it at that point. But she had a passion for it. And it took me a while to recognize it. In retrospect, it's a whole lot easier to say, oh yeah, I jumped on it, but I didn't jump on it. But fortunately, we finally morphed into it, and I started to sense, oh, this is a really special energy. And so we started, the first thing is I just brought my guitar so I could just play with her when she wanted to chant. But over a period of time, it developed momentum. It started to attract the other kids. Eventually, it attracted every single kid in the school. We ended up having a kirtan band, making CDs and traveling, going around giving concerts. But it was her energy that was leading it, and I was just in the supporting role. And it took a while for me to learn that. Another example was we had another boy, for those of you who remember Parkle, who just had this wonderful light energy most of the time, not all the time, most of the time. And he came to me, because we have a play every year, and he came to me, first time it ever happened, he said, could I write the script for this year? And I said, what? Because it was a new idea. And he says, yeah, I want to do Lord of the Rings. I said, you want to do Lord of the Rings? I said, that's 3 volumes. I said, how are you going to do that? And he says, well, I just want to try. And I said, well, okay. I said, we do our play in the winter term. I said, if you can bring a script completely ready for me by Thanksgiving, we'll go with it. This was in September. And he did. He came in with a script. We did it. And in the process, he caught the energy of every single kid in the school. Everybody was excited. It was one of the best plays we've ever done. And that was it. But it was just there's light energy coming through this person. How can I support it? How can I find a way to expand it? How can I find a way to make it more happen? So those are the 3 things I'm going to throw out to you. Personal consciousness, being aware of light moments, and then how do you support kids who put out light energy? How do you help that? And I want to just break up into groups. I'm going to say ideally 5 people in a group, because that's a number I've found where everybody gets a chance to talk, but there's enough variety. And we'll take about 15, 20 minutes and just share your own insights into this, and what you found, how it appeals to you, and then we'll come back together. So I'll let you choose your own 5 people. Yes. Okay, 3 things. Okay, thanks. 3 things is your own personal sense of light. How do you make that manifest in the classroom? How do you keep it strong? Secondly, how do you train yourself to be on the outlook for these moments of light when they happen? And the third is, how do you learn to support the kids where this light energy comes through? Okay. Well, just walking around the room, it was impressive to hear all these different perspectives on this whole idea of light consciousness. And it'd be fun to continue that some way. Was there anybody who had a really particular one that just really struck home when you heard somebody mentioning how they approach this, that they'd like to share with the whole group? Okay, we'll be content with the small groups you're sharing. So, guess what? Yogananda gave us a blueprint for what this might look like. So thanks to Anandi Gray up there, we have this handout today for the psychological chart. This isn't the whole chart. This is, maybe a little over a quarter of it. But it's online. If you're interested in the rest of it, you go to the edforlife.org and you click on the history, and then right there after Master's name it says psychological chart, and you can click on it and get the whole thing. But what I wanted to draw attention to right now is on the front part where it has Yogananda's picture. It lists these qualities by level of consciousness. And what Swami Kriyananda did with Education of Life, of course, is he put it in language that is very compatible with the Western culture. He didn't use the word sattvic, but he found a synonym. He found and he could create light. So whenever we say light, you could substitute the word sattva if you're going to use this approach. And so what Yogananda did was he listed, well, what does light consciousness look like? What does sattvic consciousness look like? So brahmacharya, self-discipline, love toward neighbors, love toward animals, love toward good qualities, bliss and calmness, love for great men. When you study this, you can see subtle variations, because if you flip down to the next one, the slightly lower consciousness, it has love listed there. It says love for parents, love for relations, love for friends. And you think, well, how does that differ? Well, it becomes clear that at the next level down, Sattva Raja, there's more of a personal tinge to it. I can love those who are close to me in some way, either by family or by friendship. But when love goes up that next notch, it breaks out of that limitation and it becomes a universal love, which expresses itself as long as these animals, good qualities, all these different things. Practical sympathy for others, benevolent tendency toward the needy, truthfulness, spontaneous, i.e. habitual, irrespective of consequences, dutifulness out of love, out of respect, reforming spirit, moral sense, a sense of ought. There's just a sense of what's the right thing to do and that the child would have on their own. It's not something you would have to teach them. Sense of self-respect, quiet, reserved, tender, faithful, obliging, patient, forgiving, acting in accordance with the suggestions of superior minds. This is another key one. There's not the egoic response of don't tell me what to do. It's just like, where's truth? And automatically there's a yes to it. Wherever truth manifests. It doesn't say here, acting in accordance with the suggestion of adults. It says superior minds or higher wisdom. So it's just kind of reflecting that. They're outspoken, have a sense of propriety, amiable, they're simple, frank, calm or balanced, having a devotional feeling. He asks here, is it habitual or short-lasting? Obviously, if it was short-lasting, it wouldn't be at this level. But it would be not too far behind it. At least there's some devotional feeling. Contented, love for mental and physical cleanliness, modest, having philanthropic tendency, impartial, gratitude toward benefactors. So, if you just take this out once in a while and reread that, and then say, okay, when you see that kind of behavior in your classroom, follow up on it. Just kind of look at it and see, okay, where can I go with this energy, or how can I attune to this energy? So it's a wonderful thing to keep in mind. It's so easy to get caught up in other things in teaching, But for me, this is the one to always come back to. Always come back to, where's the light? How can I work with the light? How can I support the light in whatever way comes up? If you do that, the adventure of teaching just goes everywhere. You find yourself all over the planet. You find yourself all kinds of situations. So it's wonderful. Okay, so we're going to take a couple of minutes. Usha's going to come up and share a couple of things with us, just as kind of little notes along the way. Then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back for our second session today.
This really will just take a second or a minute. Part of my responsibility for this conference was, and I volunteered for this, was organizing tonight a look back at what's our history. Let's look at how we got to where we are today. And so as part of that, I looked through all the Clarity magazines that I think I had almost all of them from way back in the beginning, and I did bring them in case you'd like to see these old articles through the years. So 2000, one about that I believe Hridaya wrote. 1999 summer, Hashi. 1993, spiritual education, and I don't know at this moment who wrote that one. 1990, this one's by Narani. 1988, former public school administrator Jay Casbon finds solutions in Ananda's Education for Life program. 1988, Ananda campus opens. In 1975, this was even before there was a Clarity magazine, Ananda High School. So if that sort of thing interests you, like it does me, they're here for you to see, and you could put them back on the table after you look if you would. The other thing I wanted to share, some of you are fairly new, or brand new even, and we welcome you. And some of you who've been here for a while may not know about our logo, what our logo represents. So there are 4 pieces to it, 4 different elements, and being great EFL educators, and if it's 4, all of you think of what 4 things? Tools of maturity. So that represents the tools of maturity. And of course, another basic principle is working with energy and expansion, as Irene mentioned this morning. So the spirals represent that energy movement and ever expanding into realities beyond our own. So thank you.